Jumpin' In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. Can it be? Yes, it can. A new year, would you believe? 2024. I can remember a time when I was reading Dan Dare when that sounded like a long way in the future. And we're here. And we're a bit older. However, the jazz is as good as ever, and this is the second part of our look back to some of the best in modern and contemporary jazz. Jumping in with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome to the second part of our review of the best, in our humble opinions, of the great crop of jazz releases over the last year. And looking through the lists of the best of the year through the various publications, one thing becomes clear. They're all different. Of course, there's certain overlaps, but the divergence shows, I think, what a great year we've had for jazz and how much there is to explore in this fantastic music. So, not least, of course, the contributions from H and me. So, H, what's been a thoroughly sobering experience this year and what's left you terrifically giddy other than your bill from the off-licence?
Yeah, always the way, isn't it? Yeah, where did I go? I don't know. Old, new, there's so much great stuff kicking around. I have gone way back to one of our all-time favourites back to the 1970s, Ralph Towner, still playing and had a new one out First Light, which actually I really enjoyed. It sounded really good. Not 12-string, just on the 6-string classical. Very different, and we had the pleasure of seeing Mette Henriette drifting at the London Jazz Festival. We saw her this year. Cracking album, very different stuff there. And one which is a birthday present, actually, but a second from Kendrick Scott on, I think, Blue Note Corridors. Brilliant stuff. Played that about 6 times back to back.
Yeah, in fact, we did have a word with Ralph. We might do another special reflecting on his career a bit later on. It was a bit rambling, but then aren't we all? Following on from what we're saying from me, I've got Sailing into the Sunset, Basking in the Warmth, Feeling Familiar, and to start, here's Song for Cleo from the Vanessa Perica Orchestra. Terrific stuff indeed. Following on from the success of her first album, Love is a Temporary Madness, which still gets regular plays by me, that was Song from Cleo from Vanessa Perica's second release for her orchestra, The Eye is the First Circle. And as hoped, it charts her development as a composer and a band leader. And as with Duke Ellington and Count Basie before, she really writes to showcase some of Australia's finest players, including Cole McKay and Julian Wilson on saxes. Julian, a friend of the programme who writes to us from time to time and still listens, I'm glad to say. Andrea Keller on piano, Sam Anning on bass, and Ben van der Wal on drums, all of whom have appeared on the show, along as the rest of a swinging and tight 18 Peaks orchestra. Definitely one to watch, and perhaps, H, as you're heading down under, you might even get a chance to see her live.
That's actually an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, good call. Good call. I'll keep my eye open for that. Very fine indeed, and sort of great echoes of, well, Maria Schneider. I think she must be a bit of a Maria Schneider fan, because you can sort of hear a bit of that. And also, again, a regular we've played on this show several times and had the great pleasure of interviewing Katharina Winfeld a year or two back, who was playing at the London Jazz Festival, again with that wonderful modern driving big band sound.
Charming too, thoroughly charming.
And I love the fact they do take, you can hear that they've listened to Duke Ellington and some of the great big bands of the 40s and 50s or whatever, and then they got this modern feel to it as well. And perhaps Maria Schneider, the best known of the big bands, quirky but very well respected in the business. But you have to think Vanessa definitely will have heard of her, and I'm sure will be a fan, and elements of that there. Terrific sound, really, really good indeed. This next gentleman, well, we've been listening to him for rather embarrassingly about 50 plus years or something. Ralph Towner, first albums came out, I think, that I was aware of anyway, in the 1970s, rather worrying, and one of our all-time favourite albums, perhaps Solstice, his first of two Solstice albums with Jan Garbarek, of course, came out again in the 1970s. He is still going. I mean, he hasn't played with Jan for a long, long time, but mostly goes out pretty much solo these days. We saw him 2 or 3 years ago, just off the back of lockdown, and we did an interview with him then, as we say, which was quite long and rambling, and he admitted very frankly and candidly that he'd been suffering in lockdown. He says, you know what, you lose your chops, you're not getting out there, and you lose your confidence because you're not going out in the same way. He says, I'm just trying to get back my sort of performance confidence and style again, and he had a few fluffs, and he was very, very open about it. But he brought another album out on the ECM. He's been an ECM artist for a long time. This year, In First Light it was called, and you know what? Very good indeed. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Classic Ralph, sounding as good as ever. And from this one, I've chosen Fat Foot. cracking stuff, great sound, great ECM sound. And Ralph, he must be, is he 80 now? 81? I can't remember. He must be in his early 80s. Incredible that he's still playing at that standard. And he said, it gets harder. And who knows, he might stop one day. But there it was. Came out, I think, in spring of 2023, March, April time, at First Light on ECM. Got great reviews, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, must admit. Just looking at one on online, one of the reviews saying, if you love the sound of the acoustic guitar, do yourself a favour and listen to this recording. Place the record on the turntable, slip the CD in the tray, press play, he says, on your streaming service, turn up the volume a notch higher than you might, and close your eyes. As if by magic, Ralph Towner is in your home playing the songs from At First Light. Really intimate, close mic'd sound. It is a lovely recording sound, as is always the case. And Ralph acknowledges in the liner notes that upon meeting Manfred Eicher back in the 70s, he found his approach to recording music and the standards of quality he really enjoyed what Eicher was doing. So they've maintained a partnership ever since. And I think that's pretty much all he's recorded on since the 1970s on ECM. And so if you don't know Ralph, there are dozens of Ralph Towner albums out there to go for with various Oregon and himself. Check it out. But you could do no worse than starting with this one and working backwards if you wanted to.
Of course, Oregon, the other band he's had a lifetime involvement with. That I was on various different labels, including Vanguard and a number of Italian labels as well. Next from me, an album that spent a long time on repeat in the car was Cuban pianist and composer Manuel Valera's quintet release, Vessel. Here's Sunset. All the tracks bar one are original and Manuel Valera's Vessel. And he says that all of the tracks actually honour his favourite jazz musicians, and he very much wrote them as platforms for improvisation rather than as extended arrangements. Lovely album this, quite a departure from his award-winning Latin jazz big band, the New Cuban Express, and a really good band too. John Ellis on sax, Alec Norris on trumpet, Hamish Smith on bass, Mark Whitfield Jr. on the drums, and of course Manuel Valera on piano. Vessel is on the Crisscross label and is worth repeated listenings.
It certainly is. Listening to the second part of Jumpin In's Best of 2023. Chris and myself, H, looking back through some of our favourite albums over the last 12 months. Lots to choose from, so many, and so many new artists coming up, as well as old established ones, and new and old labels as well. Edition doing very well. We're very fond of Crisscross coming in, some wonderful stuff from New Zealand coming across as well, and old favourites like ECM. I'm going to stick with ECM for this one actually, so it's I was going to say a new artist. Mette Henriette has the privilege, I think, of being the only ECM artist to debut on the label with a double album a few years back, which was great and worth seeking out in itself, but she's followed that up with something even better in many ways, called Drifting, and it's very different, again, like a lot of ECM music, not one for your car, but it's a sort of music to sit and maybe drift to, lose yourself in it, and we had the great pleasure of seeing her at London this year. Anyway, here we go. This is with Johan Lindvall, I Will Wind. Just hangs in the air there. I Wilwind, Mette Henriette on tenor sax, Johan Lindvall on piano, and Judith Hammond at the cello. And as I said before at the beginning of the track there, we had the great pleasure of seeing them perform this music live, which is quite a thing to see, really. It sounds like there's more than three. She was supporting Charles Lloyd at the London Jazz Festival 2023. I think the audience, they were all there for Charles, really. I think some of them totally dug it. Others weren't too sure. One or two, I think, walked out because it's like that. She played one 45-minute, 1 hour set, linking all the pieces together in a continuous flow. And there's nothing up and boppy that you're going to get up and dance to. It's all that very contemplative, drifting sort of sound of music. A very different style. Part Sami, part Norwegian in her origins, and sort of works across various styles. Has a big band as well. And like I said, her first album referenced tango and all sorts of different sounds, and working between trio and her big band. This one just with the trio drifting. It's had great reception in 2023. A contemporary music star on the rise, according to John Fordham in The Guardian. I wouldn't disagree with that. And I rather liked the comment of Marina Abramovic, the performance artist, who's been, I think, celebrating her 70th or 75th birthday this year, who just said, Mette Henriette is different. Can't go wrong with that. Wonderful stuff.
Indeed, you can't. And to see her playing in a large concert hall was an interesting experience. As you say, a lot of people there for Charles Lloyd at the Barbican, but it is a very big hall, and perhaps the intimacy and the space within the music would reflect better in a small jazz club.
Yes.
Difficult to say. Some people were confused by it. Now, for me, a relatively new name on the scene, saxophonist Andrew Baker, who splits his time between the UK and Spain, studying jazz and composition at the Royal Conservatoire in Scotland with Tommy Smith and Julian Arguelles. He went on to do a master's in jazz performance and modern music at Conservatorio Superior de Música del Liceu in Barcelona. From his recent release, Warmy, here's Shaman. Originally hailing from Peru, Andrew Baker there, and he says the album was inspired by the concept of duality and complementarity, Chachawarmi aspects that are part of the Quechua culture of the Peruvian Andes. He brings together a variety of musicians from different cultures and generations to play his music. I think you'll agree, it's a swinging party all the way through. The album has a lovely, light Mediterranean feel throughout and has been another regular for the car. I think Andrew, joined by Felix Rossi on trumpet, Albert Bova on piano, Masa Kamaguchi on bass, and Carlos Falanga on the drums, with Sarah Lou adding some vocals and speech.
Cracking stuff. It is Jumping In, Review of the Year, Part 2. Kendrick's got my next one on the table and asking a question which a lot of people do at this time of the year. What day is it?
Hi, this is Dave Holland. I just want to let you know you're listening to Manx Radio. The show is Jumping In with Chris and H. Hope you enjoy it. Keep listening.
A latecomer for me, Sonic Wonderland, Hiromi, Wanted. Can be a very frenetic player, but great stuff on this one. Hiromi on keyboards, Hadrian Farrow on bass, Gene Cove drums, Adam O'Farrell on trumpets, and some great pedalled trumpet as well. Quirky as ever and an amazing player, sometimes really full on, but there's a real good mix on this one. Before that, an album, like I said, I played about 6 times back to back after I got it as a birthday present, funnily enough, which was, of course, Kendrick Scott Corridors, his latest on a Blue Note, with Walter Smith III on sax, Ruben Rogers on bass. Thoroughly recommend that one. And like I said, this was a latecomer, but I've been enjoying this as well.
Hiromi is an absolute bundle of energy. Managed to catch her live at the Barbados Jazz Festival many years ago. And last from me now, a sophomore album from a young German pianist whose album I enjoyed. His first, Christian Frenson's Second Encounter, sees him bringing together a number of different trios, quartets and quintets, as well as adding a string quartet and numerous guests, including guitarist Nia Felder on this track. Christian says he used the time during lockdown to try his hand at many different styles of composition, including jazz, blues, folk, world music and writing for strings. He said he sees the album as a collage, a kind of playlist that contains all of his favourite influences. Here's Familiar Feelings, and I have a familiar feeling that we'll be back with some great music again next week.
Certainly will.
Bye for now.
Be good.